All right, thank you again for joining us for the World Food Day Begins with Seed Sovereignty. Today we'll start with two short presentations. The first one from Nettie Wiebe and the second from Valerie Nodum. And I'll introduce both of them before they present. And they'll present for 6 or 8 minutes apiece. And in between the live presentations, we'll see a few short video clips, which will add to the mix, since diversity is such a critical value when it comes to seeds and to food sovereignty. So after Nettie speaks, we'll take a couple clarification questions, if there are any. And then following all of the presentations, we'll have more time for questions and discussion. So you can type those questions into the box, and that'll give us a little heads up for what is being asked. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nettie Wiebe, who joins us from her farm near Delisle. Hope I'm saying that right. You can correct me. In Saskatchewan, Canada, where she grows organic grains and pulse crops as well as raises cattle. Nettie served in elected leadership positions of the National Farmers Union for 10 years and was the first woman to lead a national farm organization in Canada. She recently retired from teaching ethics at St. Andrew's College, excellent name, University of Saskatchewan. And Dr. Wiebe is an active participant in public discourse on sustainable agriculture, rural communities, on trade agreements, women's equity, human rights, peace, environment, economic issues, and food sovereignty. And she's got 2 recent publications on food sovereignty, which you received in the bioinformation, and she's also the co-author of Land Grabbing and Land Concentration in the Canadian Journal of Food Studies, published this year. So thanks so much, Nettie, for being with us in the midst of harvest season. Thanks for taking the time, and yeah, go ahead.
Well, hello everybody, and thank you very much for allowing me this space to participate. Let me just say that today in Canada is Thanksgiving Day, and we have just finished harvesting, so we feel like we have lots to be thankful for. So that's the context out of which I joined you this morning. I also join you out of an historical context of the struggle for seed sovereignty. And maybe I can just set the stage here a bit. We in the Farmers Union, and that's my organization here in Canada, that's, are part of the global Via Campesina. And we were there from the start, and in that first large General Assembly, when the Via Campesina gathered delegates from around the world, from peasant and farm organizations, we struggled with locating the conversation in a way that would point to the necessity and the struggle over the control of food resources. And it wasn't just for us a question, and you know this about the language, it wasn't just about food security, enough food in the world to feed everybody. It was very much, because we have that already, it was very much about who gets to decide what we eat, what we grow, who takes care of the land, who controls the food systems that we're all dependent on. And a very key part of that food system and getting control over its sovereignty, food sovereignty, is seed sovereignty. And that was very clear from the beginning. At that first meeting already, the Via Campesina set up a group that was focused on seed sovereignty, control over seeds. And at the time, and it was led by women, but let me just say that as a farmer in an industrialized context, which is North American farming, I wasn't clear why access to land and control over seeds would be such key issues, because for one, the land grabbing, which is now going on full tilt in my province, wasn't yet underway. And we in Canada had a large publicly funded, breeding program for seeds, particularly canola and cereals and pulse crops, that was publicly funded. So we farmers had access to that, and we could reuse those seeds, and we had the research being done. So seed sovereignty didn't seem to us, the struggle over seeds didn't seem to me at the time as such a key struggle. Well, since then, things have changed. We've had huge changes in terms of the seed industry, in terms of loss of public funding. In fact, it's almost gone. More or less all of the seeds that are currently being developed are in the private sector, the corporate sector, and those that were developed, like canola, entirely in the public sector and were available to farmers, have been, as you know, manipulated to be GMO seeds and are now entirely owned by the corporate sector, Monsanto for the most part. So it's, and let me just say from the Canadian experience, that is, first of all, very costly for farmers. In 1994, before all of this happened, when it was still in the public domain, cereals and canola were more or less the same price for seeds. By 2011, canola, which is entirely owned by the private sector, GMO canola, is 3 times as expensive as the cereals. And we're watching this as we speak. We're watching our government dismantle the public breeding program, and with what we call Bill C-18, get compliance, put us in compliance with UPOP 91, which means that farmers have less and less control over seeds, and it will be more and more costly. And when you put this in the global context, it is completely impossible to imagine that small-scale farmers will be able to afford the seed that the corporate sector is developing for us. So it's loss of control, huge expenses, and of course loss of diversity. We have for thousands and thousands of years, as peasants and small-scale farmers, been collecting, developing, selecting, trading, reusing seeds that are appropriate to our specific ecological context. There is vast, a wonder of diversity in terms of food growing seeds. And that is being concentrated, dismantled, destroyed, systematically decimated by this corporate sector that wants to gain control and create monocultures, which are dangerous on many fronts, but certainly for us as eaters and as farmers are not only very uninteresting and often lacking in nutrition, but also very dangerous in terms of the loss of biodiversity. But there is, of course, a lot of counter movement in this. We in the Via Campesina, everywhere in the world, are struggling to gain control, to hold control of seeds, and in many parts of the world, that is still the dominant pattern, that seeds, the seeds that are grown are local to those areas, they're heritage seeds, and the people who grow them exchange them, save them, and continue to use them. One of my little campaigns here, and it's widespread, is that this is not just for farmers, of course, seed saving. There are lots of gardeners, millions of gardeners in urban areas. Heritage seeds, seed saving. We have an institution here in Canada called Seedy Saturdays where people bring seeds to sell and exchange and so on and so forth. Keeping alive that heritage, that rich heritage of seed diversity is in all of our hands. It's a political struggle, it's certainly an ecological struggle, and it is, I think, protecting seeds and diversity is, we should see it as protecting our possibility of a future. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nettie. It was an excellent summary of where we're at with seeds and seed politics in the world, and as well as some local solutions that are beginning to address that. Yeah, feel free to click off your video, and we'll now show a short video from India to kind of look at how the seed situation is playing out in their context. And we have presenting from India in a video that the Hunger Program helped put together, Kavita Kuruganti, and I'll go ahead and play that now.
Incidentally, in India, when the frustration levels become too unbearable and high, the way out that hundreds of thousands of farmers are opting for is to commit suicide. And here comes this notion in this development vision of displacing farmers, that we will continue with farming, but with a small set of farmers, and they would hold large land under each one of them, and they can feed the rest of us. But very clearly in India in the past 15 years or so, we've seen that other sectors have grown very impressively economically, but they have no employment potential. They just cannot absorb people. And more importantly, the kind of skills that millions of people have in rural India, it's actually our strength that we make good use of them within farming. Seed is one of the most critical inputs in agriculture. Without seed, you can't do farming. And here is a country, India, where there were literally hundreds of thousands of varieties that were evolved by farmers. They were not given by nature as is. And farmers used to save seeds from their crops and resow them. But today, seed is not just one input. Seed is a whole baggage. If you bring in a particular kind of seed, you can be sure that it's been bred to respond to particular other sets of inputs that you have to provide. It includes agri-chemicals mostly. And seed is also being created in ways that farmers cannot save the seed from their crop. It is being created through technologies like hybrid seeds, technologies like genetic modification. Here are entities who want to make money out of farming. Profit is their bottom line. And they are using such technologies to make sure that farmers come back to them again and again, season after season, by saying that I have created this, I own this, I have invented this, and therefore nobody else has rights to use it without my permission and without paying up to me. This has enormous potential as far as corporations are concerned, this kind of a legal protection in the form of patents and so on. And, just to give you an example, if Bill Gates can be the richest man in the world by selling copyrighted software, how many of us own computers? How often do we buy new software packages and pay up royalties? And you could still earn so much money on it. If you can bring that system of ownership over something like seed, and claim that royalty over every dinner plate, every meal that every human being ever eats. Imagine what sort of monies could be made. The only way that farm livelihoods in countries like India can survive is to somehow push back these corporate seed monopolies and ensure that seed and knowledge of seed is back in the hands of farmers. There's of course a lot of campaigning that's possible in terms of policy analysis, sometimes adopting legal strategies, lobbying with your elected leaders and creating a debate, making sure that there's a wider debate through media picking up some of these issues and so on. But ultimately, the war will be won only if farmers, the last farmer in this country, actually holds on to seed because she or he realizes that this is something too critical and too sovereign, if you like, to be handed over to anyone else. If we can reach a stage by dialoguing with all farmers in this country and by creating grassroots level alternatives where seed is physically back in our farms, in the hands of women, in each farm household, and we're talking about hundreds of varieties of seeds and not just one or two seeds. If we can do that, then we would have effectively defied any other strategy that corporations like Monsanto can bring in. After all, you can't sue and jail millions of farmers. That's the only way, and that is Gandhi's way of, if you like, civil disobedience. That's the way that American civil leaders have also adopted. That's what we need to have on the ground in the villages of India to bring back seed into everybody's hands.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to have time for questions later. But are there any qualifying questions, things that just stumped you or needed clarity from anybody? And you can raise your hand or just type that in quickly to the questions field. Probably raising your hand would be best, and we'll try to get you on audio. All right. Well, no one's written in questions for now, so yeah, we'll just plot ahead. Next, we've got Valerie Nodum, who is with us in the Louisville office, Presbyterian Hunger Program. And Valerie, in the past, he's from Cameroon, and he was the coordinator for the Joining Hands for Lufa network there in Cameroon. He's a human rights lawyer, and he joined PHP staff in the U.S. in 2011. So he coordinates both the international development work of PHP as well as the global advocacy work of the Joining Hands initiative of the Hunger Program. And Valerie, I hand it off to you. Thanks.
Hey, thank you very much, Andrew. It's really good to be here. It's really good to be with all of you as we are entering into the Food Week of Action. It's also very good, and thank you, Andrew, to start this week of action with this conversation about seed sovereignty, without which food sovereignty is not possible. I just want to start, saying that in the work, in my work here with the Hunger Program, I have the privilege to work with communities around the world and farmers who are seeing a big danger that is affecting their way of farming and their way of existing from Africa, Asia, Latin America, in Europe, and more here in the US. Farming communities are witnessing a lot of threats to their traditional heritage, culture, sovereignty that they have enjoyed for generations through being able to select, preserve, and sharing their traditional seeds. And if we look back, sorry, trying to push out my slides. If we look back many decades, the very existence of traditional seeds has been threatened at many different levels. On one side, the laws and practices of inspired by multinational corporations is really threatening and limiting farmers' ability to use their seeds. On the other side, through the mechanism of patenting, the same corporations are privatizing life, they're seizing and controlling farmers' fundamental rights, and also controlling what we eat. In the last years, through what most people call Monsanto laws, farmers have been criminalized when they use their own seeds, and they also witness a big push to use toxic seeds made by big corporations, which require a lot more fertilizers and pesticides. That large-scale biopiracy has allowed 3 agrochemical corporations, namely Monsanto, DuPont, and Syngenta, to control more than half of the world seeds market. By doing so, they control and affect the right to quality food for all. Conserving and reusing seeds, a tradition as old as the world is becoming today a criminal practice. The good side is that all around the world we're seeing millions of farmers and many movements who are realizing that the time to act, if we want to change this, is now. And they've decided to resist against an industrial system that creates exploitation and death, land grabbing, farmers' eviction from their land, and also more and more we talk about food poisoning. These movements are demanding stronger policies that will help them protect their seeds. They're also organizing to retrieve the traditional grains, protect them from biopiracy, multiply them, redistribute them as to many farmers as possible. And I'll take a few minutes, if you might, to talk a lot about one case study from one of our partners in Haiti. This is the Mouvement Paysan de Papaye. It's a farmer movement, one of the largest in Haiti. As you probably all know, Haiti was hit by a very devastating earthquake in January 2010, an earthquake that killed about 250,000 people in the country. And as Haitians and the international community were organizing to respond to the misery and all the disasters created by the earthquake, Monsanto here in the U.S. sent to farmers in Haiti a very special Easter gift. Monsanto sent them 600,000 seed sacks. You probably see one of them in the hand of our friends in Haiti. All together about 475 tons of hybrid corn seeds and vegetable seeds, which, according to Haitians, were treated with highly toxic pesticides. And for our partner, for MPP, Mouvement Paysan of the Papaye, in Haiti, for decades, they have been working on sustainable farming techniques and agroecology. For them to receive seeds after the earthquake was a new earthquake, was a second kind of earthquake for them. And they felt like that was a very strong attack on small agriculture, on small farmers, on biodiversity, on Creole seeds, and on what was left on the environment in Haiti. In a country like Haiti, where most of the soils are already depleted, agroecology for them, has proven to be the way forward, as it would help feed families. It would restore the agricultural land that had been degraded by deforestation and conventional practices. When Monsanto decided to give the seeds to Haiti, at the time there wasn't any law in the country regulating the use of GMOs in that country. So because of that, the Ministry of Agriculture had decided to reject the seeds from Monsanto, but they got all the guarantees from Monsanto that those seeds being donated were not GMOs. And by the way, the seeds were distributed in Haiti by a program called WINNER, which is USAID funded. Many sources reveal that the hybrid corn seeds that Monsanto had donated to Haiti were actually treated with a fungicide called Maxim XO. And the tomato seeds were treated also with another pesticide called Tiram, which belong to a highly toxic class of chemicals. Apparently, the Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. had banned the marketing of these chemicals for many garden products, but also in workers touching them, working with them, needed to wear special protective clothing, and not many people in Haiti were aware of that. So what our partners, what MPP did in Haiti, they organized a march with tens of thousands of farmers who came together and decided to burn the seeds that they had received. And by burning the seed, they were sending a strong message to their own government, but also to the whole world. And what they said at the time, and I'll quote them here: fighting hybrid and GMO seeds is critical to save our diversity and our agriculture. We have the potential to make our lands produce enough to feed the whole population and even to export certain products. The policy we need for this to happen is food sovereignty, where the country has the right to define its own agricultural policies, to grow first for the family and then for local market, to grow healthy food in a way which respects the environment and Mother Earth. These concerns from Haitian social movements and other movements around the world is not just about the dangers of chemicals and GMO imports. What they claim is that the future of agriculture depends on small farmers, and they see the arrival of seed giants as a threat to this. They're asking that the world acknowledge their past, present, and future contribution to the conservation and renewal of biodiversity. They want guarantees of their rights to reuse, exchange, or sell their farmer seeds. They're asking that life be protected and for patents to disappear. They want the right to produce and consume food that is free from pesticides. And we at the Hunger Program, we believe that selecting, conserving, sharing seeds should return in the farmer's hands, just as Kavita was saying earlier in the video from India. We believe that food sovereignty will not happen without seed sovereignty. And we support and work with movements that exchange seeds, build perennial relationship around food sovereignty, seeds autonomy, and know-how that is related to farmers' seeds. And that's the fight that most of these farmers are in today, and that's the fight that we are all in. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Valerie. Haven't seen any questions written in, but wondered if Nettie, whether you've got any commentary or response to what Valerie was saying. I know you've worked with groups via La Via Campesina involved in Haiti as well.
Yes, I was very interested in both of those videos, and they confirm for me what we have found in the Via Campesina around the world. Two things, and that is that the diversity and knowledge and thousands of years of development that people of the land, peasants, have put into seeds cannot be lost, and that there's a strong struggle everywhere to retain that, to honor that, and to maintain that. And the second thing that strikes me is wherever you go, India, Haiti, Canada, it's basically the same corporate giants that are being named as the entities that are trying to steal that heritage and convert it into their own profit margins. That strikes me as obvious from the discussion so far.
Excellent. And we've got a question coming in from a colleague in Canada, but I think we'll save that for the Q&A session. What I'm going to do right now, since we've got time, is show two short clips. One is from India again, but from a different part of India. And then to look at the U.S. context a bit, we'll show a 4-minute clip from a great documentary called Man in the Maze to look at the situation of seeds in the borderlands between the U.S. and Mexico. But this first clip from India is from the Food Sovereignty Alliance of India in Telangana state. And it kind of brings it right down to specific seeds and how they're connected to the culture, and bringing forth and maintaining that rich cultural tradition. So let me go ahead and show that, and after that we'll go directly into the Borderlands clip. Just 7 minutes total, so if you've been listening and not putting on the screen, you might want to check this out. Here it goes.
జొన్న బియ్యం, తర్వాత సాం బియ్యం, తర్వాత కొండెం ధాన్యం, వదులు, పప్పులు చెప్పన, బొబ్బర్లు, జునుములు, కందులు నాకు ఇష్టం చాలా. జొన్న పిండిలో పప్పు, ఉప్పు, కారం, పసుపు, జీలకర్ర, కొత్తిమీర, టమాటా, ఉల్లిగడ్డలు అన్ని వేసి మిక్స్ చేసి చేస్తున్నాం.
The earliest chroniclers of southwestern agriculture were about 1540, and they saw this incredibly diverse agriculture. It was a very, very healthy diet that protected people from the kinds of diseases that now afflict many. By the time many of us were born, we had just a small fraction of the kinds of diversity.
The Southwest, and Arizona in particular, have seen very rapid climate change. Climate scientists have reported that temperatures in the southwestern U.S. have increased at double the global average.
In dealing with climate uncertainty, we need bed hedging strategies. And the best bed hedging strategy is the most famous one. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Native seed search was begun with 3 of my friends and very few dollars.
The purpose and mission of Native Seed Search is to conserve the rich agricultural heritage of the greater Southwest region. We work to keep that diversity alive and available to farmers and gardeners who can use it to enhance the local food systems. Once these seeds enter our seed bank collection, then we have taken on responsibility for maintaining them forever.
We're really at a critical time in the history of American agriculture, not just because of the loss of seeds, but the loss of the traditional knowledge associated with how to best use those seeds.
I really believe that you can grow food here. I think it's an educational effort that has to happen. I think the stigma of what a farmer is absolutely wrong. To teach people to grow food locally in their backyard gardens, how it used to be. Everyone used to have a garden or a community garden, so it engages people to take care of one another.
We're finding solutions emerging from some of the most devastated landscapes in North America to rebuild a food system from the bottom up in a participatory way is the same kind of thing that we're doing in small rural communities in the borderlands.
I had a vision, and my passion is helping people. And my vision was to start a garden where the community can come in and pick their own vegetables, fruit. To me, that's one of the most satisfying things since I started, that the people here in the community are getting fed.
Before I became a mom, I had no idea about gardening. And it wasn't until I had the heart problem and became a mom that I went, wait a minute, do I want to teach my daughter this? And that's really what inspires me in the garden is I get to spend time with my daughter. I get to teach her about harvesting her way to better health, eating fresh foods. I want her to see that there is a positive transformation and that people can make positive things happen and there is a healthy lifestyle and how to be, a healthy and strong citizen and put back in their community. And I think that's important for her and for anyone.
Food is a sacrament. Food is what binds us together. It's sacred, and it behooves all of us, whether it's for health reasons or because we care about the land or because our faith requires us to care about the people most marginalized by a broken food system, to heal that food system, and that's the only way we're going to heal our economies, our bodies, and the land.
Great. So we've got a question from Gary Kenny. And before we do that, and I'm going to try to unmute you, Gary, and see if you can ask the question yourself. Just was wanting to hear if Valerie or Nettie, you had any response to either of that Indian context or the U.S. context, which we haven't spoken of as much, but is probably very, very similar to the Canadian context as well.
Valerie here, just a quick word to say again, it's everywhere. I think as we're talking about seeds being lost and with that loss, the sovereignty, the culture of people being lost, it's happening everywhere. It's not justified, happening all the way down in India or in Africa or in Europe. It's happening here as well. And I think that's something that calls all of us to really come together, sit down and have conversations on how to change that.
Great. Nettie, anything you'd like to add?
No, I just continue to be reinforced by that message. Yes, there is actually something small. It strikes me that in an industrialized society like ours, where there's so much focus on economic issues, what's often overlooked and devalued is what was pointed out in both of those film clips, and that is that there's a tremendous depth of knowledge. It's not just picturesque, it's beautiful, but there's also tremendous depth of complex knowledge that's being lost when you wipe out seed diversity.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, Gary, you had a question? And feel free to introduce yourself quickly. All right. Looks like you're unmuted, but maybe there's an audio issue. So I'll go ahead and read your question. Okay, and it's addressed to both speakers. Vandana Shiva, oh, are you on now, Gary? Okay. Vandana Shiva once said that with a strong global people's movement and the requisite political will on the part of governments, the global industrial agricultural model can be transformed, basically turned on its head in favor of agroecological oriented smallholder farmer food production, which can sustainably feed the world as well as lead to a process of strengthening of the rural countryside that would have far-reaching beneficial social, economic, and environmental impact. What are your thoughts on this assertion, and is change on this scale possible? Who would like to tackle that first?
Can I leap in here?
Sure.
Let me just begin by saying it's not only is it possible, it's absolutely necessary. And just a small aside here, which seems to me a portent of what we can look forward to, and that is that there is in fact a growing movement within the Via Campesina, but elsewhere in the world also, among urban people also, towards understanding agroecology, and it's connected to environmentalism, to climate change worries, and a whole nexus of other problems that confront us as we march along with the industrial model destroying that which supports us. I mean, in many cases, literally cutting off the branches we're sitting on. So one of the things that I find enormously encouraging, and which makes me think that Vandana isn't just speaking of the impossible, that she's speaking of the possible, is that there are lots of young people engaged in agroecological training now and beginning to do small-scale farming. Even here in Canada, where that's a daunting prospect, that is happening, and it's happening everywhere. So that makes me very hopeful that the transformation is possible. But the Via Campesina, and in our own context, it's very clear, understands that this is a huge political and economic struggle. And that engagement in that struggle isn't... it's on the ground, and it's not easy, but it's absolutely necessary.
Thank you, Letty. Valerie, any thoughts on that question?
Yes, I mean, I believe that there's actually not any other way around. If you really think about, it, you know, today with the trend that we have just described, still we have 90% of farmers all around the world that are still using their traditional seeds and produce more than 70% of the food that we eat every day. So I think it is already happening in a lot of ways. And if you think about it also, farmers are 99%. I think if you look at, you know, corporations, they come in with a lot of money. Most of the time they have, you know, the politics and the policies with them, but they represent actually 1%. And, you know, I just came back from Haiti 2 weeks ago, and I remember the conversation with farmers, you know, talking about who do you think is really leading the country. And most people will say politicians and politicians, but when you ask what will happen if all farmers in the country for 1 week were saying we're not sending any food to the market, what do you think will happen? I think that's usually when you realize that the actual power is with farmers. Because all these politicians, all these corporations, all of us, we need to eat every day. What is happening already, but needs to happen at a larger scale, is that ability for farmers to come together to speak with one voice, because I really believe that's where the power is.
Great. Great challenging question. And we've got a question from EJP Mooley. And I'm trying to unmute you, EJP. Don't seem to be able to. Maybe, Jenny, you're able to find EJP Mooley and unmute. That's strange. Usually I can. Okay. Well, I think the question is pretty straightforward. So, okay, now you're unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question. Thanks. Go ahead. All right. Unfortunately, the audio doesn't seem to be set up on that end. So yeah, the question is what governments and the private sector is doing to food sovereignty is really ecocide. Why don't activists address it as such? Neti or Valerie, how would you respond to that?
If I can just respond to that, I mean, I agree with the sentiment entirely. That there's a very dangerous level of destruction going on all around us in many ways. But let me just remind us that in some ways it's such a powerful model, that model of industrialization and development is such a powerful model that that it's been very hard for people not to be, even the critics, and I consider myself among them, not to be in one way or another complicit with or adaptive to that model and participating in it, because we live in contexts and it seems impossible, for example, to farm in Saskatchewan without using fuels. I mean, we're organic farmers. We don't use pesticides. We don't use chemical fertilizers. We are diverse and integrated, but we use machinery and fuel. So it's in some ways the political movement has to be inside the context and be reminded, as you've just done here, remind us continuously and on many levels of just how destructive these models are, and cultivate alternatives, which as Valerie has reminded us, that's on the ground, the experience everywhere. There are alternatives everywhere. One of the problems with the hegemony of the corporate model is that they in some ways, they not only extinguish biological diversity, they extinguish philosophical and spiritual diversity too, and clamp down our imaginations in such a way that we can't even imagine alternatives. And I think that's one of the roles of activists, is to imagine and articulate alternatives in a compelling way, because there are many alternatives, and the seeds of life are not easily suppressed.
Beautiful, and a great challenge to each of us to keep our imaginations alive and to use them to bring about that other world that is possible. Valerie, any thoughts on that question?
I totally agree with the eco side, and I think that's what you see everywhere, because with the new seeds that are being introduced, farmers are saying, hey, they're not good for the soil, they're not good for the environment, or our forest is being destroyed to plant seeds that most of the time are not food. And I think the way around, again, and with what we see, from farmers around the world, they're addressing the issues from very different angles, looking at the ecological side of it, looking at the very human, political, economic side of it. And I think that's also the way to really tackle the problem. And coming the struggle, looking at the ecological crisis that this new paradigm is creating, but looking at and looking at the political side as well, looking at the economical side that this change is bringing to farmers. But yeah, I totally agree that we always talk about it, or many people talk about this always as a food problem. But at the end of the day, it's really about killing ecosystems and killing life. And
excellent. Yeah, thanks. And I think that brings us right to a great final question, which kind of begs the issue of, where do we best direct our issues to foster life and seeds and seed sovereignty? And so the question is, we talk about the right to food, the right to seeds, etc. Can rights be lobbied for and won, and then realized with governments as the main conferees of such rights? Or must they ultimately be claimed through assertive people's movements and direct action, street action?
I'll go first there. I think, ideally I would say yes. Everybody, farmers, if they take the streets, if they go on the street, if they say no more, that's usually the only language that powerful governments or corporations seem to hear. But I also think at the end of the day, these governments are the ones signing agreements that, as a result, put farmers in that difficult situation. So at the end of the day, it's also, I really believe, a lot of education for those who are making these decisions. I'm not always certain that they understand exactly what they're signing people into. I think it comes also to supporting organizing. That's essential. If you look, I talked about Haiti, but that's the same in India, in Africa, in Latin America. For farmers to be able to come together in the same room, coming from different corners around the world, that's hard. That costs a lot of money. But that's the only way to make sure that by being that force and constituting that that force, people will finally hear what's happening. I think it's happening a lot around the world. I think what we should do is to try to really raise these voices and make sure that more and more people are aware of these struggles. There's a lot of education that still needs to happen at all levels.
Thank you. Nettie?
Yes, I never pose that as an either or. It seems to me that those happen simultaneously. You have to be in the streets, you have to be in the people's movements, but governments have, as has been pointed out, a tremendous amount of power, and we're not right now in the Canadian context in an election and confronting a national election, and it matters whether you have a government that is full bore ahead in corporatizing the world and signing TPP and CETA and all of these egregious international trade agreements, or whether you have a government that is a little more attentive, at least, to some of the people's, the citizens' movements and the people's demands from the ground up. So I think that it's not an either or. You have to struggle for this change, this transformation in our world on many levels.
And where do people begin? In their personal lives, in their communities? What are some steps to start to expand food sovereignty, seed sovereignty?
I think it starts with all of us, and I think we tend to have a very selective memory, when it comes to talking about seed sovereignty, because the only way the world was ever able to, feed everybody on the planet was to use traditional seeds, where farmers were able to eat some of the production, sell some in the market, select some that they will exchange with people. I really feel like that's exactly what needs to happen today. By starting with our own garden at home, by deciding to buy organic, and by educating ourselves more to make sure we understand exactly what is it. It's not just words, but there are very fundamental problems that are happening all around the world. By educating ourselves more and being conscious of our purchasing power, of the changes that we can bring as one, I believe that's what will make the difference for us to be the change that we want to see in the world.
Great. Any last words, Nettie, on how people can, what kind of first steps people can take?
I think that's been well said. Eat with gratitude and consciousness, and live with that spirit of diversity that surrounds us, and just appreciate it. Part of that struggle.
Beautiful. And I would just, as we celebrate the Food Week of Action and World Food Day on the 16th, the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance is giving away their Food Sovereignty Prize, and you can watch a live stream of that. Hopefully it showed up in your chat or question box with the website to watch it and get updates so you know when it's happening. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Special thanks to Nettie and Valerie for your words and insights. And yeah, celebrate life, celebrate food sovereignty. Plant where you can. Thank you, everyone.